All right. Well, welcome back to Tell Me What You Do. This is our new interview series that we are starting. And my name is Philip Shackelford. I'm the library director here at South Arkansas Community College. And I have the incredible honor this month to interview Dr. Bentley Wallace, who's our president here at SouthArk. So, Dr. Wallace, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Philip. I'm glad to be here.
Well, if you don't mind, I think we'll just jump in and get started. So, tell us
Great.
what you do.
Yeah, so I'm the president of a college, and that's a role with an awful lot of different hats. But first and foremost, my job is to make sure that our students are getting what they need, and that they have the ability to be successful in their educational goals. And then second is to make sure that our employees, our faculty and staff, have what they need to be successful in supporting our students. And so if we're going to roll it up into a nutshell, it's really about serving students and serving our faculty and staff. And that's what they pay me to do.
Well, you nutshelled it fairly well right there. I wonder, as you talk to different audiences, or if you go to conferences and you're in different settings, is there an elevator pitch, or is there a certain way that you use to talk about your role and the job itself?
Yeah, it's it's about relationships first and foremost, and as we look beyond the student support and the employee support, the job is really about being able to connect with people in the community, elected officials, granting agencies, people who help make money available to the college, to what we do, and you really have to be a master of a lot of different skills. We've got lots of facilities. There are political things that you have to figure out and navigate. There's an awful lot of state and federal regulation that we have to follow and know about. Finances and budget are always huge. Marketing and PR, we have to be pretty savvy around that. We have to attract students to our college, and then once we get them here, making sure that they're successful and making sure that they stay and get what they need in terms of higher education. And so it's about relationships. It's about working with anyone and everyone who has an interest or desire to support education and support students, and ultimately drive the economy in our region, and raise the per capita income, and raise educational attainment levels, and help support our global economy while we expand the global view of our students, and make them a well-rounded citizen.
Well, and you talk about the economy and workforce, and that's something that's been near and dear to your heart over the years. I wonder if you could take us back, how did you get started in this career, and take us through the journey a little bit?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. And like a lot of people, I didn't start my career in higher education. I came to it after successful careers in several different private sector ventures before finding myself working in higher ed, which was never on my radar. I went to school at Arkansas State University. I got a degree in marketing with an emphasis in transportation. I expected to go into the transportation sector, specifically around the aviation industry and air traffic control. It was sort of the family business. My dad was an air traffic controller in the military, and on the civilian side, my brother was an air traffic controller, and I expected that I would do the same. And about the time that I was graduating from college, the FAA put on a hiring freeze, and they weren't hiring new air traffic controllers. And so I launched out and did some hospital administration work right out of college at a regional healthcare center in Arkansas. After that, I got into the real estate business a little bit, and developed some properties. I got into the construction business, and thought that I would be a very successful entrepreneur around construction and residential housing, and not so much. I finally moved into transportation. I managed warehousing and third-party logistics company, just-in-time delivery, large-scale international shipping and receiving company in Arkansas. And from there, made a transition from warehousing and distribution to the solid waste industry. And I spent several years working in the solid waste industry in Arkansas, and running large hauling and disposal operations. And then shifted into over-the-road trucking for a period of time. And all of those things, whether you're doing warehousing and logistics or trash pickup, you're hauling stuff over the road. It's all the same thing. You're just moving product around. Sometimes it's trash in the back, sometimes it's not, but it's all logistics. And did that for a number of years. I was in the transportation sector from 1997 until 2005, 2006 actually. And in 2006, through this weird chain of events and conversations, I was approached by a company. They were interested, their vice president of international sales was about to retire in a year or so. And they came to me and said, hey, wouldn't you like to go to work for us and learn this craft? And when he retires, you take over his spot as VP of International Sales. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty cool, but I don't know anything about that product. And so I went to talk to a guy, and I knew that he was really good friends with the CEO of the company that was pursuing me. And this guy that I went to talk to happened to be the chancellor of a two-year college. And he said, well, if you're interested in changing jobs, why don't you come to work for us? And it was an opportunity to run a truck driver training program at a community college in Arkansas. Well, I knew something about trucks and truck drivers, and didn't know so much about community colleges or higher education, but it was an interesting concept. And my wife is an educator, a professional educator and teacher, and Philip, like you, she's been a library director, and she always talked to me about how education is a calling, that when you recognize that your work is about serving people and making a difference and seeing the light bulb go on and changing lives and helping people move out of what may have been generational poverty, and you realize that piece that makes that possible is education, that you recognize that the work that you do is a calling. And I always heard her say that, and I never got it. I didn't understand that. And I believe that she believed that, but I'm not sure that I believed that it was really a thing, if that makes sense. Sure. And but I took the leap of faith and joined the community college, ASU Newport, to run their truck driving program. And I was there. I was only there for a few months before the moment happened where I got it, and I understood exactly what she meant when she said that it was a calling. And it was a moment in time where a student explained to me the difference that the training he got at the college was going to make in his life and in the life of his family. Yeah. And from that moment on, I was hooked. It was what I finally realized after being in the private sector for so long and bouncing around and still trying to find, I was successful, but I never did find that thing that made me realize that my work was impactful on other individuals. And I was hooked when that moment happened. And so I looked for opportunities to expand and grow in my role. And I took on additional programs at the college as the manager for those. And the chancellor, the guy who hired me, he kept coming back and said, well, do you want more? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, you're going to need to get some more education, because in higher ed, there's this expectation that you continue to pile up these degrees in order to be qualified to manage things, right? Or to teach at higher levels, and so do research. So I went back in 2007 or 8 and got a master's degree, and thought, well, that's that. I'm finished with that educational journey. But I was able, with the additional degree, to move up and take on more responsibilities at the college. And then a year or so after that, the same guy chancellor came back to me and said, do you want more? And I said, I love what I'm doing. I do. I want to do more. And he said, well, then you're going to need to go get another degree. And so then it was time to get on the path to getting a doctorate. And so with that, I moved. We moved from Newport to North Little Rock, and I took a position with at the time was Pulaski Technical College. Now they're UA Pulaski Tech, part of the University of Arkansas system. So I spent about 6.5 years at ASU Newport. I spent about 7 years at UA Pulaski Tech, and in various roles at Pulaski Tech. I started there as the vice president for economic development, running non-credit operations at the college, and working on partnerships with employers and municipalities and elected officials and chambers of commerce, et cetera. And did that work for a few years, and then transitioned into a new role in the last year and a half or so that I was there. We reorganized the academic structure of the college and created 3 new schools within the college.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the first dean of one of those new schools, and took on some additional responsibility back in the traditional academic sphere. And along the way, I completed my doctorate at the University of Arkansas. And through that time, while still at Newport, the concept of the idea of perhaps being a president or chancellor at a 2-year college in Arkansas started to bubble to the surface. And through our time in North Little Rock and earning the doctorate and moving up into higher levels of administrative work at Pulaski Tech, started to pursue these opportunities and look at them and explore when they would come along, both in Arkansas and beyond, but primarily Arkansas. We're Arkansas people, our families are here. We wanted to stay close in Arkansas if we could. And so, it's been a little over a year ago now that the opportunity presented itself to apply for the president's position at South Arkansas Community College. And we studied it and thought about it and looked at it as a family, and our teenage son, everybody had an equal vote in whether we would pursue this or not. And after we researched it a little bit, everybody was a yes, and we went at it as aggressively as we could. And early December last year, interviewed, and then decisions were made right around Christmas time last year. And I began at the college February 1st of this year. And it's been a great transition. The path to getting to this role, getting to be a president or chancellor at a college in Arkansas, was pretty traditional once I got to higher education.
Right.
Once that idea of the possibility of becoming a president or chancellor, we moved through that in pretty traditional sense. But all along, I think the real thing that sits with me is that I would have been content to not be president or chancellor. I was content as a division chair at Newport. I was content as a vice president at Pulaski Tech. I was content as a dean. And the reason is that I know that the work that I do can make a difference for people.
Right.
I know that the work that we do at the college, and everybody at every level at a college who engages a student in their own way, whatever their role is at the college, everybody has the chance to be a teacher. Everybody has the chance to be an advisor. Everybody has a chance to be a recruiter. Everybody who works at the college has the opportunity to do that. And when you recognize that, when you realize that those roles, regardless of your position at a college, that you can make a positive impact on somebody's life through education, then it's fairly easy to be content whatever your role is, because you can lay your head on the pillow at night and know that your work makes a difference for people. And so I'm thrilled to be in the role that I'm in. It's what I wanted to do for a while, and the chance to be at SouthArk and be a part of this incredible team. I can tell you, I've looked at all of them. I know all of the P's and C's jobs. There's 22 of them in Arkansas at 2-year colleges. I know them all, and this is the dream spot. El Dorado SouthArk is really one of the best possible locations, best possible schools, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be here.
Well, that's awesome. And I think you've probably hinted at some of this already, and you can go any different direction you want to with this. But what's your favorite aspect of the job?
Yeah. First and foremost, seeing the students succeed. It is particularly, and I think community colleges are uniquely positioned to witness this probably more than any other sector of the educational hierarchy, is that we see students who succeed when they never thought that they would.
Mm.
You know, the percentage of first-time college-going students from their families, we have way more of those at community colleges than they do anywhere else. Students who come from financially disadvantaged backgrounds, minority students, underserved populations, we serve more of those students than any other part of higher education. And as a result, we get to see students succeed who may have never thought or have never seen somebody succeed in this arena. And so that is by far the best thing that we do, is when we take somebody who didn't know if they could or weren't sure if they should, and we help them, and they're doing it, they're doing the hard work, but we're there to support them and get them through that. And so by just all the way around, that is the best part of this job, is to see those students succeed. There's an awful lot to it, you know, the community engagement and the relationship building and all of the things that a college president has to do, fundraising and goal setting and all of those things. They're incredibly important. And you know, we're measured by that. We're measured by student success. We're measured by how well we manage diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives. We're measured by fundraising goals. But ultimately, student success is where it's at. That's the biggie. That's the one that if we can't do that, there's really no reason to be here.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if you could take you know, the flip side of that coin for a second and explore what might be some challenges with a role like this.
Yeah, one is that, and I don't know that it's unique to this position, but certainly in this position it is highlighted. Everybody comes to you with their opinion of how things should be, and particularly in a public institution like this, where we have an appointed board of trustees, and there's, you know, that group of people are appointed by our governor, and they're appointed, and they love this college, they care about this college, they're great advocates for our college, but they have, you know, really high opinions, and it's their role to have an opinion about how the school should function, how the president should function. And then you have community leaders and elected officials who have been the ones who have made this enterprise go since its inception. And we've gone through several iterations as a school. The building that I'm in was built in 1905, but there's been, you know, educational activity on this site since the mid 1800s. And in this building, it's been a junior college, it's been a high school, it's been a women's school, and then a branch of Southern Arkansas University from Magnolia. We were a branch, and then we, in 1992, became a standalone institution when we merged with Oil Belt Technical College here in El Dorado. And the reality is that all of those community people who come to us with their opinion about what we should do, they're entitled to that because they were the ones who made this thing go in the early days. The people who were here in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, when we became an independent school in 92 and beyond, so many people who were instrumental in creating this college are still highly active in the community and have valid and legitimate opinions about what we should be doing. And I know I'm taking the long way around to get to your question, but the challenge is that those people and all of their opinions are valid, but they don't always align. And so when these influential people, whether they're former students, current students, former employees, current employees, board of trustees members, elected officials, you got to tell some of them no, and you got to help convince them of why they need to at least agree that we need to go a different direction. And that it's very difficult to when you recognize the level of influence that all of those groups have on the success of the college.
Yeah.
It's difficult to respond and say no. And so I think that the challenging part of this job is to pause, as particularly when the answer is no, and make sure that I understand the reason why the answer is no, so that I can explain to them it's not just a knee-jerk reaction. It's not something that I don't just like the sound of it. You know, one of the things we take real pride in higher education is working together. And yeah, we've got way too many committees and task forces and councils and ad hoc groups, but really that shared governance model is the hallmark of higher education.
Yeah.
And so taking inputs from a lot of people, getting as much information as possible. But the challenging aspect is when people who are so passionate about what they bring to you, and they've got good justification and good rationale, and you have to say, I'm sorry, that's not the direction we're going to go, and here's why. And it's not always comfortable, and I'm okay with having conversations that aren't comfortable, but it really is difficult. And a really a tightrope act in many cases, because right after saying no to somebody who is an influential person for many of those groups I mentioned, you need to be able to turn around and make sure they're still your advocate. And you need to make sure that that conversation in the moment where you're saying no doesn't in turn deteriorate the longstanding relationship you have, and the fact that tomorrow I'm going to need to be able to call on them and get them to help us with whatever important work we have to do. And so I think for me, 8 or 9 months into this thing of being a college president, so far that's been the challenge that I continue to work on. I suspect that that's not going to get easier over time.
Gotcha. Well, and I'm wondering, we talk about higher education and if we talk about administration specifically, what advice do you have for someone who's maybe a student or other folks who are interested in pursuing a similar path? We talk about certain steps or credentials. What should we really keep in mind?
Yeah, it's I think with any career pursuit, I think you have to be purposeful about it. And I explained earlier that I sort of bounced around in my 20s and early 30s, and I was doing good work, but it was just by happenstance that I got into those things, and it was happenstance that I got to higher ed. But once I had that moment of clarity and realized this is what I needed to be doing, then I was very purposeful about pursuing moving into higher levels of responsibility. So I think that just like with any professional goal, you have to decide how much work are you willing to put in to attain the level you want to achieve. Because if you're going to move up within any organization, unless you're somebody's nephew, in the C-suite, somebody's nephew from there, you're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to prove your mettle and earn your way there. And so, do like I did. Figure out what the necessary steps are. I talked about going back to get a master's degree and going back to get a doctorate. Are those things required? No. There are presidents and chancellors in Arkansas who don't have doctor in front of their name, and that's okay. They earned their path another way. That was just one piece of me earning that opportunity. I felt like it was a necessary part of what I did along my path. And then you have to be strategic. You can't sit back and just wait for the opportunity to come to you. You have to seek out opportunities, not necessarily around what the next job is. You have to seek out the opportunities along the way to be prepared so that when it does come along, you can pounce on it. Because when it makes itself known, if you haven't prepared, you're not going to get it. You're not going to be ready. And the hiring committee is going to see through that very quickly, that they don't want to train you to do the job. They want you to come in ready to do it. Right. And so you've got to take advantage of educational opportunities, professional development opportunities, leadership development opportunities. You have to build your network. You absolutely have to know people in your organization and outside your organization who can be a resource to you. And that doesn't happen without an extreme amount of work. You have to purposefully find ways to insert yourself and engage. And that means serving on boards, which I know you do. Philip, you do that at a very high level, but you have to find leadership training opportunities. And typically that's a leadership development program where you network with peers and colleagues from around the state or the region, or maybe it's a Chamber of Commerce-based leadership group from your community. But those sorts of things are so valuable when the time comes. If you need a reference, if you need to call somebody and have a good confidential conversation that will be just between the two of you, the people in your network, having that relationship and having that connection, because it's not just about the people they're so critical, but it's about who they know, right? Because you can't know them all, but if you know at least an expanded group right around you, people you connect with and who you genuinely, it can't be for show. When you develop those relationships, it has to be meaningful. And some people you'll click with and some people you won't. But the ones that you do connect with and you stay in touch with and that you personally nurture the relationship. You can't simply let it sit out there until it's convenient for you to call on somebody and ask for a favor.
Right.
What has to happen when it's done right, you develop those networks, you develop those connections, and you nurture that and you stay in touch. And so more than likely, when an opportunity presents itself, it's because one of your network people are saying, hey, you should be looking at this.
Right.
And when they bring it to you, or at least when you talk to them about it, if you've nurtured that relationship, if you've built that over time, that trust relationship, and they know you, when you say, hey, what do you think about me pursuing this? Not only are they going to say, oh yeah, that'd be great if you could do that. They're going to continue that conversation and say, well, you know, I know so-and-so who sits on their board, or I know so-and-so who teaches there, or, you know, I've got a cousin who lives in that town and I'd be happy to call and talk to them about it. You have to have that network of people who are your advocates and your allies. And when you look particularly in small rural states like Arkansas, I think it's not unheard of, but it is much more difficult for somebody from outside to come in and try and infiltrate. And maybe that word is too strong, but simply because we're such a close-knit community. In Arkansas, about 3 million people, and you don't have to throw a rock very far to hit somebody you're either related to, or go to church with, or are in Rotary Club with. I mean, the degrees of separation are not many in a state like this. And so that there's good and bad with that. If you're on a positive track and people see that, that's going to be good because you've got a lot of connection points to a lot of people who can put voice to that. If you're not so good, people are going to know that too.
Sure.
And in a small state, you can't hide that. And so I think that depending on what your career aspirations are, what your goals are, when you're looking, if you think that your next step, let's say somebody is a faculty member and they want to become a dean, or it's somebody who works in financial aid and they want to become a vice president of student services. Whatever that trajectory is, they've got to look at, do I want to stay local? Am I willing to look beyond here? And what does it take if I look beyond? How far does my network stretch?
Sure.
You know, really good people can go across state lines or go across the country, go around the world and apply for jobs. If you're highly qualified, you're going to be considered. But when you have that connectivity, when you have a personal connection, and I can attest this, when I applied down here, I know that there were probably a dozen people, and you find this out after the fact, but about a dozen people from South Arkansas who were not on the search committee who were calling people that I knew, and to find out, hey, who is this guy? You know, do we want him in town? And you know, I think by and large, I probably got a pretty good report from the people who were called. But the reality is, particularly with social media, you know, you talk about connectivity, and it just takes a couple of clicks. And again, a small state like Arkansas, very quickly I can see who you know that I know in common, and I'm going to call them. I'm going to find out if I'm a concerned community member and you're talking about coming in to be a high-level administrator at a college. I'm going to do that. I'm going to check it out. And again, it goes back to that community relationship, community engagement, and all those people care about this college. And whether they're on the board of trustees or on our foundation board of directors or sit on one of our advisory committees, or if they're just a long-term, you know, person in good standing in the community, they're going to do their homework, and then they're going to offer their opinion to those who are ultimately making the decision. And that, if you don't think that all of that happens behind the scenes, particularly at the executive level, you're fooling yourself. And you're not going to keep many skeletons in your closet during the process. People are going to know what's going on, and they're going to talk to your friends, and quite frankly, they're probably going to talk to your family because somehow we're related through a cousin somewhere. So anyway, I don't know that I got anywhere close to answering the question that you asked.
No, that's great. Yeah. And I wonder, you know, you talk about the career and the journey that you've taken, if you could reflect on, you know, maybe an experience or a few experiences or people, individuals that helped you along the way.
Yeah, there were several. And they were in unusual places sometimes. You know, I had great mentors, great bosses along the way. I just went recently, Sandra Massey, who is the current chancellor at ASU Newport. She was my boss for a short time, and I was involved in the hiring committee when we brought her to Newport years ago. Just a great mentor. I've learned a lot. I've had 4 or 5 different bosses in higher ed over the past 12 years or so, 12 or 13 years. And I learned something valuable from all of them. Sometimes that was how I wouldn't do it if I was ever boss, a lot of times. But all of the people who I worked for were so supportive and encouraging, and I try and take that with me, that my role as president or is to make sure that I'm supporting people and whatever it is they're pursuing. I shouldn't stand in the way of that, but offer that resource. But then there were lots and lots of other people who supported me, and a good number of those were people who were on similar trajectories. And so some classmates, when I was working on my doctorate at Fayetteville, a couple of those classmates are now very close friends of mine. One of them I've never met in person. It was, a lot of our courses were online, but we worked on, group projects together in class. We were doing our dissertations at about the same time and leaning on one another. And so we've never met in person, but we have a very close kinship. Colleagues around the state in Arkansas who at two-year colleges, I mentioned the leadership groups, and I was in at the time it was the Arkansas Association of Two-Year Colleges. Now it's the Arkansas Community Colleges, which we just changed names 4 or 5 years ago. But I went through the Higher Ed Leadership Institute with that group in 2010, 2011. And so there were 25 or 26 of us that went through that, and fully 15 or 16 of those people are very close friends of mine to this day. And 10 years later, and that group was always there. We were always there for one another. But other colleagues around the state, people who, I've done a lot of speaking at conferences and events related to workforce development and other things. And, people would come up afterwards and say, hey, I'd love to visit with you. I'd love to hear more about that. And just striking up that collegial relationship. And then as you enter into those challenges, you're thinking about changing jobs, you're thinking about pursuing a degree, you're not sure if what you're doing is making a difference. Having those people in your orbit really, they make the difference. They make they can recognize, particularly people who are doing similar work, because they can commiserate with you. When you talk about the challenges you're facing, they recognize that, they can understand that, and they can offer real-time and real-world advice that somebody who may be a great close friend or a counselor of some sort, they can give great advice, but they don't have that lived experience. And so I think that finding those people, finding those connections with people who have similar experience is so valuable and so important to be able to look at what's next, and so critically important that they give you timely advice, but hypercritical advice. You really have to be comfortable with having people in your life who will tell you the truth and who will be critical when you're not doing the right thing. It does you no good whatsoever to have a group of friends who are just going to tell you, oh, it's all rainbows and butterflies all the time, you're doing a great job. It does you no good whatsoever, because you're never going to pause. You're just going to be narcissistic, and that's no good for anybody. And then finally, the most important thing, at least for me, is family connection and those people at home. And I mentioned earlier that when we decided to pursue the job at SouthArk, that it was a family decision and an equal vote among all three of us. And I think that for me, recognizing early on that the work that I try to do, the aspirations that I have, the goals that I have, I'm really fortunate that I didn't fall into the trap of thinking that what I wanted alone was what was best for my family.
Right.
If you do that in a silo, just individually, if it was just me, sure, I'll plow ahead and be as aggressive as I can. But to do these jobs right and to get to the highest level, it requires a commitment, much more so, I think, from your family than it does for you individually, because doing this job right, and the jobs I was in before, it's not uncommon for me to have 4 or 5 nights a week where I've got an event that I'm gone from the house. And so whether it's a city council meeting or a quorum court meeting or something at the Chamber of Commerce or a dinner that I've been invited to, or something at the college that we need to be at, And just that sheer number of events that we need to be at, whether that's a ball game or a Christmas parade or whatever, that takes its toll. That takes a commitment, and it's real easy to fall in the trap of not seeing that my being gone, especially when our kids were younger and it was bath time or dinner time or homework time, and that I wasn't home, and that my wife was handling all of that. And doing a great job. And I mentioned earlier, she's a professional educator. It's not like she didn't have a full-time gig of her own to take care of while she was doing it. And so having that support, having that person who, and this has happened several times in the past 15 years or so while we've been doing this, but I didn't recognize until after the fact how much additional work and burden my family had taken on to get challenges out of the way so that I could focus on the goal. And that was short-sighted of me to not recognize it in the moment. But after the fact, realized the sacrifice and the commitment was definitely not mine alone. It was a family affair. And, when people say, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the support of it's so true in our case. I wouldn't have ever left that job in trucking to go to work in higher ed if I hadn't had family support. And that moment in time, that one conversation with the chancellor of the 2-year college in Newport, when I went to just ask a question, led to this pathway that I never. Who would have thought when I was in my early 30s working in the trash business, that by the time I was 51, I'd be a college you can't make that up. You can't draw that connection and make any sense of it.
Right.
And but I think that's the beauty of life, is that whatever path we're on today, that there are thousands and thousands of other pathways we can jump on and be successful. And I go back to that point that for me, getting that master's degree and that doctorate along the way opened doors that wouldn't have been open otherwise. And just like our students at community colleges who may not know what path they're on today or be pleased with it, just one little sidestep onto the path of education can propel you into some pathway that you never dreamed was possible. It's not that I didn't dream it. It's just, I never even, it wasn't anything on my radar. And so I didn't know to dream about this. And I, check back in a few years and see whether it's still the dream job or not. I know the college will be great, but you got to be careful what you wish for. But again, I strayed a long ways away from your question.
No. Well, no, and what I was going to say too, with you talk about the different paths, and there's so many different paths you can take. What I think is good for folks, and especially students, to remember is there's so many things they can be doing now, even though they may not be aware of another path, to prepare themselves, along the way. And I was just talking with a coworker yesterday about students developing relationships with their professors. Just making those connections, even if you're not taking their class, just being in the vicinity and having those conversations that can lead to so many different things that you may not can envision in the moment.
You're exactly right, and I think that the takeaway from that is don't get locked into one thing. If you know what you're supposed to do, and some people do. Some people grow up when they're in elementary school, they know exactly what they're going to do.
Right.
My wife's a great example of that. She knew she was going to be a teacher. She always knew she was going to be a teacher from the time she was very young, and she's a fantastic teacher. She knew that. I didn't have that. I never had that sense of this is who I'm going to be when I grow up. I never had that sense of direction, I guess. But I think education cures that. I think it not only can help focus, put you on that focus path if that's what you need, but it also, I mentioned earlier, that global view, that widening of a person's perspective as a result of education. There are only a few things that do that. A really deep self-introspection can help you with that. Reading can do that. Travel can do that. And education can do that. And it's because you get to explore concepts that you never knew existed. You get to talk to people who you didn't know before and learn from them. And I'm talking about fellow students, faculty members who help that light bulb come on and trigger that desire for knowledge. And when we do that, when all those things line up, that global perspective gets broader and broader and broader.
Right.
And at that point, the blinders are off, and you can see this. There's this whole world out there to explore and to consider, and you get out of that really narrow, myopic vision of here's what I'm destined to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's for most of us. I don't think most people are like my wife, who knew what she wanted to do at a young age. For most people, that myopathy, that tunnel vision, really, really restricts, because they just simply haven't been exposed to that broader. And that's what we do. That's what community colleges do. That's what higher education does, is broaden that global perspective for students. You get to engage. You have to engage with people who are different than you, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And as a result, your perspective changes. Just like reading, just like travel, you encounter things that are different. And when we encounter different things, the mind just expands exponentially into what is potential. So I don't think we can understate the importance of, education for education's sake is really great. Education for what it does for a person long term in terms of their life opportunities is unmeasured all too often in what we do. But it really is the magic sauce that happens at community colleges.
There you go. Well, I wonder if we could, switch gears just a little bit. Here we are coming to the end of the year 2020, and this has been a very different and often tragic year in a lot of ways. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected your work and higher education and the industry a little bit.
Yeah, I'll start with me first. I talked about narcissism earlier, and maybe that's what this is. But I mentioned that we got here February 1st of 2020, right. So we were here right at 6 weeks when everything shut down.
Yeah.
And so what we expected to experience as new people in El Dorado, Darby with a new job, me with a new job, our son at a new school, all the things that we anticipated happening as we went through the process of applying and interviewing and getting the job at SouthArk and moving to El Dorado. You get in your mind what everybody talks about the first 100 days or the first 6 months or the first year. And after 6 weeks, all of that was blown up. What we expected to have happen, getting to know people, getting to know our new neighbors, for me, getting to know employees at the college at a personal level, all of that was derailed. And the focus, those things that I thought I would be spending time on, were all of a sudden completely out the window. And I went from spending, 100% of my time planning to engage and planning to coexist in this new environment, to where all of that just went away, and I was spending 90% of my time worrying about studying, thinking about adapting to our new reality around COVID, which was a moving target in those early days. Every day it was new information, it was new planning, it was new reactions, and it wasn't unique to us. And so we had the support of all the other two-year schools in the state and community colleges around the country to help see how people were choosing to respond based on the circumstances in their area. We had good support from elected officials and the Division of Higher Ed, and it was good to have those resources, even though information was lacking in the early days. But it changed fundamentally who we are and what we did at the college in the spring. Our people were so good to react and change and support students and find new ways to continue teaching and learning and engagement and get students to the finish line for commencement, which we didn't have in person. All of those things happened, and the change is in many ways going to be permanent. What we knew on March 12th, we'll never go back to that again. Our way of delivering content to students, our way of engaging students, our way of meeting, as we have this conversation on Zoom. Many people will never return to a traditional office setting. They've proven that they can be at least as efficient, if not more efficient and productive, working remotely. And so our world is fundamentally changed. And then along the way, these COVID adjacent events that have happened in a geopolitical sense, an election year, an extreme weather year, all of these things that compound the complexity, civil unrest, um, you know, all of the things around underserved populations, and um, all of those things, all of our humanity on such display at a time when COVID has ravaged our country,
Right.
and not only from the debilitating health perspective of ravaging the country, and the unnecessary, or at least uncontrolled deaths around this pandemic, um, but the fact that it's had such a detriment to our economies,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's had a detriment to enrollment in community college. I mean, all of these things that are fallout from um, what should or could have been an isolated medical event spiraled into a much broader national and international crisis.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of how SouthArk maneuvered its way through, and continues to maneuver its way through this global crisis, and not just the health piece of it, but all of the things, as
Right.
I said, COVID adjacent. Um, we've done a great job. Our people are so savvy, and so committed to our students, and so willing to find new ways. And then amid all of that, um, our people are doing such a great job of finding new ways to connect, and find those moments of normalcy amid everything else. So
Right.
when we have events, whether they're a book club online, or whether it's finding ways to share new music, or it's ways to connect, we're doing it in limited fashion, but really, really important ways. And communication, and valuable and important communication is such an important thing now, because people are worried, people are stressed, people are naturally anxious about what's next, what's going to happen. And so I couldn't be more proud of how the SouthArk team, students, faculty, and staff, our community partners, how everyone has made sure that we've kept going. It's not been easy, it's not been fun, but I think that barring some great tragedy that we couldn't imagine worse than this, we're well prepared, and certainly capable of powering through whatever comes our way. And that's has nothing to do with me, and everything to do with the good work of our students and faculty and staff. And if I was at a community college before I came here, I would have been living this experience of COVID at a community college had I not come down here. I'm really, really pleased that if we've got to weather this storm, to be in this spot at this time, and watch so many dedicated people make it okay, and
Sure.
make learning continue.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's encouraging to hear, how, like you say, people are making it work and making the adjustments that need to be made. So let me just, as we wrap up here, just ask if there's anybody out there who has enjoyed this and is interested in learning more, or wants to reach out. What's the best way to find information about you or the college?
Yeah, so a couple of things. If you want to learn about what I'm doing, follow the college's Facebook page, Instagram, YouTube, our ancillary social media channels, like the library, like the South Arkansas Arboretum, our Upward Bound program. If you want to see what a college president does, watch follow our social media channels and see the good work that's being done by the college, and you'll recognize that I'm here to try and keep us between the ditches, but everybody else is doing hard work. Follow me on Facebook. I am on Twitter and Instagram, but I don't post there regularly. I do post on Facebook quite a bit, some personal, some professional. It's all commingled. And if you want to see some of the nuttier aspects of what I engage in on a daily basis, you'll see pictures of my dog. That's the best place to go. Come to our webpage. There's a president's page on our website.
Right.
My email and my office phone numbers are there. But give me a shout. I love to talk to people who are curious about what's next in their life.
Yep.
I like to have that conversation and see if I can offer at least a little bit of guidance on who they might talk to, who I know in my network that I can connect them to,
Right.
and explore what their potential is, and help them unlock that, because everybody has it.
Yep.
Everybody has the potential. Everybody has the opportunity to find a path that is right for them. But we all, and I needed it, and everybody does. You've got to have somebody who helps unlock that vision.
Sure.
And mine's not done yet. I'm anxious to have those conversations with people, because I don't know, what's next for me as college
Right.
president. I want people to help influence the work that I do here. And I'm looking forward to a long tenure at the college, and being able to see the work that our people do, the students who come and go, the employees who come and go, the successes they have. And I love to talk to people about those things. I love to have conversations. I love when folks show up at my office and just want to sit and visit.
Yep.
People always seem apprehensive about doing that. That's the best part of my day, when I can turn away and not read email for a minute or not answer the phone for a minute,
Right.
to actually take a break and visit and talk about a movie we've watched, or something that was on Netflix, or a book that we've read, music that we're listening to, what our kids are doing, what our dogs are doing. That's where it's at for me. So I hope people will connect and reach out. It's easy to find me, B Wallace at SouthArk.edu. Find me on Facebook and follow and join the conversation and celebrate the great things that are happening at South Arkansas Community College.
Well, I appreciate it, and that was a wonderful pitch for getting in touch and reaching out. I hope that many people do. And thank you again for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, and this is something new we're doing, and I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for asking. I appreciate it, Philip. Take care.
Take care.